Are you listening? Damn.
And a big welcome back to the Endurance Hour podcast alongside Coach Wendy Mader. I'm Dave Erickson. We begin on this episode with a question from Luke. What is typically the longest ride people go on before their 70.3 race?
Well, it's a very common question, and my first response was it just depends on the person, their experience, and their speed. So I like for an advanced athlete training for 70.3, if time allows in their schedule, I like to go, bump them up to about 70 miles. And if they're an advanced athlete, they're going to complete that in about 4 hours. So it also depends on if you're training by time or distance, what your longest ride's going to be. And one of the main reasons, there's two main reasons, is number one, when you do a 70 mile or like a 4-hour ride, that's more than half the time that you're going to be out there for the 70.3. So it's getting the athlete used to just being outside for more than half the duration of their race, as well as, just riding more hours. So, if you've ridden 70 miles, even if you're a beginner, then 56 miles in your mind, as well as physically, seems that much easier. It's 14 miles. No, it's 24 miles less than 70 miles. So extending the training on the bike gives you a little bit more confidence, and it's just a challenge to make the real thing maybe feel a little bit easier. Also, you can go longer than the race distance on the bike. You don't necessarily want to do that all the time on the run, because running is more impact on your body and you're putting yourself more at risk for injury. So again, the volume on the bike to me is a little bit more critical. If it's a first time athlete who's never ridden or trained for a 70.3 and maybe they've done an Olympic distance, then at least getting them to 56 miles. If they're at 50 miles, if they're at 50 miles, okay, what's another 6? Mm-hmm. And then, I kind of will give an athlete kind of a range, today's your longest ride of the training period, go for 50 to 60 miles. Because I think having a range is really good, because 50 to 60 miles on a hilly course could take an athlete 4 or 5 hours, whereas a 50 to 60 mile ride on a flatter course can take an athlete anywhere between 2.5 and 4 hours. So it really does fluctuate depending on the terrain, the experience, and if you're training by time or distance. Me personally, I just like that 70 mile ride before a 70.3.
One thing it also teaches you, these longer rides, is how to fuel and get nutrition in the longer you ride, so you can pace it out better, I think. So if you are on a 4-hour ride, for example, you kind of plan your route if you're outside of where you're going to stop for new hydration. That's always a key. Where's the closest, gas station or convenience store to top off your water bottles, but also having enough nutrition on your person somewhere to plan it out. That way you don't finish the bike ride hungry. I notice that's an issue for me if I'm doing something.
Yeah, exactly. And something I just thought of, a lot of times, not always, but athletes who train for 70.3 tend to also be training for an Ironman either that year or maybe in the future. Mm-hmm. So when you dangle out that 70 mile ride as they're prepping for a 70.3, it gets them a little bit of experience of, okay, what are these 70 mile plus rides going to feel like when I jump to that 140.6? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's an experience thing. But like I said, if an athlete does not have the time, then I will, maybe make the longest ride 2 to 2.5 hours. And I'll structure more intensity for that athlete to do in a shorter amount of time.
Can we expand on that? Because you and I talked about this in the recent weeks about if you don't have time for your workouts, increase the intensity. And why does that matter? What's the helpful factor on a shorter ride, harder intensity versus I have the full amount of time to do my workout?
Well, any training plan is trying to balance the volume and intensity, the frequency, duration, and intensity level. And again, that's the art of coaching, is trying to help the athletes balance the frequency, intensity, and duration. And so, for like a time-starved athlete who doesn't have the hours to train. Maybe they're training for an Ironman or 70.3 in that 8 to 12 hour time range. Their program is going to involve more intensity than an athlete who has, 15 to 20 hours to train. So regardless of intensity or duration, you're trying to have the athlete make certain adaptations based on their limiters. An athlete their limiter, like myself, for example, my endurance is my strength. I've been training for a long time. My limiter is being able to go long and more intensity. So over the last few years, I've been lowering my volume of training and increasing my intensity. So when I decide to train for another 140.6, I have that a little bit strong. I'm a little bit stronger, a little bit faster to be able to extend that further and longer. And so in my mind, again, it's helpful to know the athlete. I wouldn't just tell an athlete, if you can't ride 3 hours today, ride an hour hard, because I want to know, did they ride hard yesterday? Are they going to ride hard the next day? So to guide someone whether to ride shorter and harder or longer just depends on what else they're doing for the week. We had this discussion with your training last week. I knew, based on what we talked about, I knew I could give you good advice by telling you to go harder today rather than longer based on your schedule and based on what you've done up until this point. Mm-hmm. But it's not always that simple. You want to make sure you know the big picture of what the athlete's already doing, because too much intensity could harm an athlete, as well as too much volume can hurt an athlete. It just is so relevant to where they are, their experience, and what they need to adapt.
I think the example for someone to kind of put themselves in my cycling shoes, I may have had a 2.5 hour ride, maybe 3, I can't remember which, and time was a factor. So the suggestion was, after a 15-minute warm-up or 10-minute warm-up, I was going to do a 3 by 20 at a hard intensity. I don't know if it was zone 4 or zone 3, and then have a nice little cool down. And it was a great workout. Mentally, I was able to compartmentalize, this is a short, intense effort. I can nail it. Versus, I can't squeeze in. If I have a 3 hour ride, I feel like I'm shortening myself if I go for 2:15 and it's not quite the full workout. But because it was 2 by 20s and I hit my markers, like, this felt good, and I felt like I had a quality workout.
Yeah, so I recall originally it was like 3 by 30 minutes at zone 3, and we cut that down to 2 or 3 by 20 minutes at a high zone 3, low zone 4. So we kind of kept, with the intention of the workout, we just modified it to fit your schedule. And that's really important to be able to make those adaptations based on, your time and your commitment and what else you have going on in life. It's really important to fit training around your life rather than try to squeeze your life around a training plan.
And that was the follow-up workout, was the 3 by 30s. And again, just because we've all been there, the workout was, I think, a little bit longer. And the question I had for you was about, gosh, I forget exactly what it was, but I ended up doing 3 by 30s at a high intensity, which was hard. But your question for me was, have you been following? It was a 12-week intermediate upper level 70.3 plan. Had I been doing the previous 6-week workout? And I hadn't really been following it, the one that we have on Training Peaks. But I've been working out consistently, and I wanted to test myself. And I nailed the workout because I wanted to prove to my coach, Wendy, that I could do it. And I also wanted to see if I could do it. And I think I did it, and it felt great. And so in a way, it built my confidence, and it's very individual, that I am kind of on track where I should be with the plan that we both designed and put together. You created it, but we put together. That, okay, good. I'm on track. I got 6 weeks to go. This is 6.5 weeks. I got 6 weeks to go. I'm okay. I'm where I need to be. Just need to keep on doing the other stuff around it.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Starved timed athletes. I like that. Next question from Cindy. I'm curious what folks do and what coaches recommend in terms of the tapering of your strength program. Understand this one?
Yeah. Now that's, again, another great question that can be really confusing. So when I design athlete strength training within their program, I'm following the, phases of training that they're in. So when an athlete's starting a plan, then their strength training is more of the mobility stability phase of training. they're easing, they're getting into a routine, they're kind of doing low intensity frequency of workouts, and so they're getting their muscles and tendons and ligaments adapting. It could be also called the adaptation program. And then when they start to move on to the end of their base training, where they're doing more strength on the bike and the running in the form of hills, or more strength in the pool in the form of paddle work, then I bump up their strength training into a maximum strength phase where they're lifting lower reps, higher weight. And then as they get into their competition, they go into more or less like a strength maintenance. So it's a little bit more of that stability, mobility with a little bit of strength, but not so heavy. And if, depending on the experience of the athlete, I'll add some power moves. So they're doing a little bit more power, a little bit more faster efforts, moderate weight. And then as they start to taper off their swim, bike, and run training or whatever sport they're in, then they also taper down their strength training into lighter weight and going back to their phase one, the mobility and stability. And often, like a week before the race, I personally don't strength train, and that's kind of the personal coached athletes that I coach. I don't have them strength train unless they want to maintain a little bit of core stretching, mobility, 10, 15 minutes max at a time. So you definitely want to lower the frequency, lower the volume, and then lower the intensity like you do everything else.
This question from Alexandra: how much of your riding is outside in nice weather relative to indoors on Zwift? Is this a question directly to you or in general?
I think in general, but it's a good question because I was actually thinking about that the other day. So from my own personal experience, I don't mind riding indoors, and I actually was riding Zwift for a while, and now I was switched to Ruby, and now I'm on full gas, which is the same program as Ruby. I do that a lot in the wintertime, and then usually in May, definitely by June, I'm more outside on my bike. So what I'm personally doing now is I took the tri bike out maybe 2 weeks ago, and it's been hung up since November. Since I was done with Ironman Arizona, I hung my tri bike up, took it outside, and I'm just riding to ride. I'm riding more for endurance. I'm riding more just to get comfortable back in that tri position. And the roads from my house aren't necessarily conducive to doing much structure because of the traffic and the hills and all that.
Yeah.
When I'm ready to do structure, when I'm getting more race specific, I will take my bike to different locations where I don't have the interference of cars. And so I can do a little bit more structure, like we were just talking about 3 by 20 minute efforts at zone 4, or 3 by 30 minutes at zone 3. Right now, I'm not doing that. And then indoors, what I'm doing is more power focused training where I'm getting in specific, again, just like I talked about, specific intervals, with high cadence drills, low cadence drills, more strength with a little bit of shorter intensity like VO2 max zone 5, as well as some threshold. So I'm still getting in that intensity indoors. And right now my comfort level, I'm just getting comfortable being outside again. And that'll switch to mostly, I'm getting ready for Kona in October. So probably by July, if not all, my riding will be outdoors, and it'll be a little bit more structured. So it just depends on where you live and what the conditions are like. I think safety, number one. Like sometimes I intend to go outside, and then I'm like, the time of day, the traffic, nah, I'm just going to stay inside because I think safety for me is number one. If I'm feeling like something's going to happen to me outside, it's a mental thing, then I will stick to indoors.
Yeah, I made that decision recently too of doing it indoors. There's so many different convenience factors with the hydration, with the food, with entertainment. If you're watching something on TV or an iPad, and also like you're talking about precision, working on staying focused in the right zone versus, I think it's about the same thing. There's plenty of hills wherever I live, and it's hard to think and plan the route that is the flattest with the least amount of intersections or cars, or the shoulder needs to be wide enough. And there's only a couple that I feel comfortable, but it takes a while to get to those points. And I never want to drive and then ride.
Right.
I want to ride from my house and go.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm now comfortable. I lived in Georgia long enough. I'm comfortable now riding from my house, either on the road bike or the tri bike. But to get a little bit more race specific, I know I have to drive to safe locations.
Mhm.
And I just don't want to do that right now, but I will. And I know my indoor riding is going to translate to outdoor strength and power. So I'm not really worried about that. One of my limiters is riding downhill. And so I'm glad I'm getting outside on my bike now. It's only May. That's just early for me to be outside on my bike, but I'm glad I'm getting comfortable on my bike now because I need to manage my downhills, and even the gentle downhills. I need to manage them better on my tri bike. And then I'll end up going to the north, probably July. I'll be spending more time in the northern Georgia mountains, getting some big long climbs in, as well as, more important for me, long descents. And it's usually not that much traffic when I'm riding up there. It just takes it's such a big commitment to drive. It's just such a big time commitment.
This next question from Kathy. My pool is closed for a month for repairs. I know how frustrating that can be. I do have access to open water, lucky for you. Do you do swimming drills, etc., in open water lakes? And how do you measure distance, Wendy? That's a tough one.
Yeah, so I mean personally me, whenever I go for lake swims, it's more for recovery, getting used to sighting, which is a drill. I mean, I have sighting drills and just kind of getting comfortable whether I'm wearing my wetsuit or not in open water. And again, when I'm in that race specificity phase, I actually will take a structured pool workout and try to do it outdoors because I want to make sure I'm putting in the intensity in a lake like I would in a pool. I'm such a pool swimmer. I've been a swimmer for my whole life. What I often suggest for athletes I coach to keep track of distance is more or less a stroke count. So if you know it takes you 20 or 25 strokes to swim 25 meters, then you do that outside. You take 25 strokes and you know you've gone about 25 meters. I also can rely on the Garmin, the GPS, but I find that in open water, it has not been accurate for me. And I don't want to be looking at my watch. That's just not something I do in the pool. I don't look at my watch. I don't want to be looking at my watch in open water. But I know some athletes will do that. I also know that where I swim now at Red Top Mountain State Park is I know the distance from one end to the other, either direction. And so I have an idea if I swim from the starting point to the dock, that's roughly 300. If I swim from the starting point right across, that's roughly 150 meters or yards. It doesn't matter to me. So I kind of have an idea based on the course. But I really think it's important, and I think athletes lack what I used to lack, is putting in intensity when they do open water, putting in race specific intensity. Now, another example is I coach a lot of athletes in Colorado, so I know the venues that they swim in open water wise. And one venue is they have a 400-meter loop. So when I structure their plan, I'll tell them to do, a 400 warm up. And then I'll tell them to do a half a lap hard, half a lap easy, 1 lap hard, half a lap easy, 2 laps hard, half a lap easy. So I have an idea that 1 lap equals 400. So I'm able to structure. And then I tell them if rain happens or you can't get in open water, well, here's your structured workout. You just take it to the pool. Or you can take any structured workout in the pool. And if you have the opportunity, take it in open water and just count your strokes. So if it says 100 meters, do 100 strokes.
Is that the Boulder Reservoir or is it a different place?
Union Reservoir. Boulder Reservoir has usually a 750-meter course laid out on Thursdays called the Stroke and Stride. And then Union Reservoir, every twice a week, I think they have a 400-meter course laid out that swimmers can go in at Union, which is in Longmont, which is, like 30 minutes from Boulder.
So the big buoys out there?
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you have, and what do you suggest for people in terms of safety and visibility? Don't people have like a flag that they can float behind them so people are visible when they swim out in these open water
Yeah,
lakes?
buoys. I have a buoy. I don't remember the exact name, but I think it's I know Blue 70 makes those buoys that you can tie around your waist and it kind of just drags along your side.
Mm-hmm.
Orca does, as well as other companies. And actually, in these buoys, they have a zipper pocket that you can store like your keys or valuables.
Yeah.
And I read in a Facebook group, some people put their pull buoy and hand paddles and fins in their flotation buoy. So when they're out in the open water and if they want to put on their pull buoy or paddles or fins, they just open up the zipper of their buoy or their storage area of this flotation buoy that's providing um, safety
Yeah.
for them, and they use those tools in open water, which I thought was a great idea.
And you're talking about intensity, and I was also thinking about, well, if you are doing these intensity or these hard efforts within your open water swimming, that there's really no place to stop and break unless you are going to a point where you can touch the wall or something like that. So having,
Right.
whether it's these core shorts or some sort of mini wetsuit on, or the pull buoy to keep your flotation, you keep your body up because you're going to get tired. You don't want to sink. What are your suggestions for that?
Yeah, if you wanted to do like 10 100s with 20 seconds rest,
Yeah, do you
I'd say,
dog
do
paddle in the
100
middle?
strokes. I
Oh,
would say don't necessarily stop, but do like 100 strokes hard, and then do, 10, then maybe do like for 20 seconds rest, maybe do 20 strokes really, really easy, and that's your rest.
okay.
100 strokes hard, 20 strokes easy. That would mimic 100-meter hard, 20 seconds recovery. Or if you are wearing a wetsuit and you just want to rest, you rest on top, you kind of lay on top of that safety buoy that's behind you,
Hmm.
and your wetsuit's going to help keep you vertical and keep you afloat. That's also another option.
You can also lay on your back with a wetsuit on and just kind of float.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, this question from Brenda, and this is a question I'm sure everyone has come across at some point in their training, their journey. So she says here, I'm 6 weeks out from my first 70.3 in prep for a fall full distance, and she's losing her why a little bit, at least recently. And she has a super supportive family, but she can't help feeling selfish or alone during some of these longer sessions when she's constantly thinking about other things, and what's going on in her life. Most of her training is in the early morning, so it's not a big deal in terms of interfering with her family, but she's still having a tough time finding motivation. Her question is, what's your why? And how do you find your why?
I was talking to my sister about this. When your why is strong enough, the how is easy. And I got that from one time you posted that on a social media site. That quote will always stick with me. Um, you know, I've been through periods, I don't train for an Ironman every year, because I've had those periods where I haven't been motivated to put in the training like I like to do to be successful in an Ironman by how I define success. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get through this Ironman, and then I'm going to take a year or two or more off. I don't want to do this Ironman training for a while. And so again, when my why is strong enough, the training does become easy because it becomes such a priority and important part of my life. I get it in, but I also get it in around, what else I have going on in life. And so I think she had mentioned when she's training, she's thinking about other things that she's rather be doing. I would suggest, modify your training, shorten it up, maybe add some more intensity, shorten the volume, like we talked about earlier in the podcast, so you still have more time to get the things done that you want to be getting done. And also want to point out, when you do train in the morning, like the other day, I went to the pool at 4 a.m. with my husband. I'm either going to be sleeping at 4 a.m. or I'm going to be training. I'm not going to be doing anything else. And so it kind of made the training a lot mentally easier, because if I wasn't training at that time, I'd be sleeping. I wouldn't be doing any other work or family related stuff at 4 in the morning. So I think it's important to kind of look and, take a step back, maybe take a day or two to, maybe you need recovery. Maybe you're not motivated and don't have a why because you're exhausted and you just have too much going on. But I would take a step back and look at the big picture of your life and list the priorities and making sure you're getting those done, and then trying to modify your plan to adapt to your life schedule. Also, having training partners or a coach. I think one benefit of having coaching is they're there with you, they're on your journey with you. They're going to listen, they're going to understand what you're going through as an athlete. And sometimes, your friends and family might not get it. And so having that accountability partner or coach is very helpful to get you through the difficult times. And you're also 6 weeks out. That's where the bulk of your volume and intensity is happening, like right now. So once you kind of get through that and you start to taper down your training until race day, that might be all the motivation that clicks and that why becomes more evident of, oh, okay, I remembered why I signed up for this race. So again, answering the question about how do you find your why, I always ask the athlete, well, when you signed up for this race, what was your intention?
Mm-hmm.
What was your goal? And has that changed? And if it's changed, well, then we need to talk further. If it hasn't changed, just don't forget your why and your intention of signing up for the race, and hopefully that'll help get you through the tough times.
And it sounds like Brenda is early in on her longer distance triathlons because she's training for her first 70.3 in prep for a full in the fall. Yeah, for a fall Ironman. And I thought about this too, and I've done this a lot, probably longer than she has, is I have a shelf life of my motivation window, of my why window. And even though I've had a 12-week plan leading up to my first half of the year, I know that I'm really only good for so many weeks of focused motivation. It's hard to maintain that level. And I've fallen off the wagon a number of times over the years in season, like, I don't feel it. I'm just not feeling it because I've gone too hard, maybe too early, or the training started too early and I've got a long way before the end. And so my goal personally this year has been, let me gradually build up the focus for an end of year full, which is in November, but I can't go too hard too soon because then I don't want to burn out, which I have in the past. So that's probably one of those learning experiences over time. When is your most focused window? How long is it? And she's 6 weeks. You better be focused for 6 weeks. Maybe you are a 10-week focused person, or maybe 16. You can hang on to that long and stay focused on your why for that long. That might be something she's experiencing now. Is like, did I start out too early and too hard? And
That's a really good point. I like it. And something I thought about while you were talking was, if you're feeling like you're being selfish, if you're feeling like you're taking away time from family or friends, significant others, talk to them about it and make sure you find out how they're feeling about your training. I have an athlete, I'm not coaching this athlete, but there's an athlete, he's a parent of one of the swimmers I coach, and he's dealing with issues where his family, kids and wife, don't mind when he goes out for a long day on the bike on the weekends, but what they're struggling with is when he comes home and he's exhausted because he's home, they want daddy time and husband time, but he's tired. And so when you open up that communication with your family, if you're feeling like there's any issues, it's just a conversation and opening up that conversation and finding out how they're feeling. Maybe they're like, oh my God, we love it when you're gone because then we can do other things while you're gone, but we just want you to be present when you come back. And if being present means you have to cut your ride an hour shorter, then cut your ride an hour shorter. It shouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah, I think knowing that going in and not having someone resent what you're doing, and then you not resenting what you're doing when you come back, like, oh, I'm so tired. Now I got to do this. If you feel like you got to do anything, then you refocus your priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah. But definitely having them on board prior. I made sure I did that this whole season where I'm picking a half Ironman and a full Ironman and a couple in between, small ones. So I need to have the family on board. Like, do you support this? Before I pay for this, are you prepared and are you willing to do the same that I'm going to be doing? Are you willing to let me have these weekends or let me have these big training blocks like this last weekend? That was one of our little negotiation points. Like, all right, your 3-hour window has started right now. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm out. I'm done. And I'm going to do my thing now. Or like on Sunday, all right, what's your workout today? What am I sitting and waiting for? I said, well, is it time or distance? Well, I'm going for a distance. I'm just going to go, and when I hit that, I'm coming back. Okay, cool. Now I know. And then the same kind of weekend thing coming up now is like, all right, your window has started. I accept it. This is the wife talking. I know we're doing this, so do it now. It's like, okay, cool. As long as you're on board, but don't pressure me. Let me do my thing. I just don't want to be pressured that, all right, in a way that it feels pressure. Like, hey, start. You're starting now. Okay, you better be done in 3 hours. All right, well, just let me do my thing. I want to work out strong.
Right.
Just as quickly as we wrap up here, kind of a shorter episode in a way, about a half hour, we're going to welcome just a couple of new members to the T2 Endurance group on Facebook. It's a closed group. We have 700 members. We're going to add 701 and 702 today. Wendy, do you have any little background on Derek, who just requested less than a week ago?
Yeah, I started coaching Derek two, not this season, so last year. So we're on year 2 of coaching him. He lives in Mississippi, I believe, and he trains for sprints and Olympic distances. He's also a first responder. So talk about schedule issues. He's
Mm,
super busy guy. And so structuring the training for him has definitely been short and intense,
hmm
and trying to get him to maybe do a little bit longer volume, not anything like a 70.3 or 140.6, but trying to get him to do a little bit longer volumes on the days he doesn't work. So it's been an experience for both of us, trying to manage his training around his life schedule, but it's worked out really well. And so I'm glad he's finally heard about the group and he's joining.
So he is 701. Our next person who we're going to add as 702 is an Air Force veteran, and she heard about us through the podcast. So welcome to the podcast. This is Belinda, and she is training for Ironman CA, which I don't know if it's Canada or California, and she does have a Training Peaks account, and so we want to welcome her as well. And she is member 702. So if you're interested, check us out on T2 Endurance Club on Facebook, and then just answer a couple of questions so we know that you're here for the right reasons, and we'd like to have you on board. That, my friends, is going to end up wrapping up 357. So for Wendy Mader, I'm Dave Erickson. Have a great week of training, my friends, recovery or racing. See you next time. Adios.
Adios.